Well, the computer system I'm using here is one that we called Augment, and it was born in the 1960s, and initially was called NLS for Online System. And then immediately people say, wouldn't that be OLS? And we says, well, no, because we had an offline system too that was OLS. So, I don't know, but anyway, that evolved, and this was long before there was any popular access to the network or people using word processors. So it was a combination of word processor, and we integrated into it electronic mail and even spreadsheets that we could use and implement. And with the particular motivations I had about the end purpose of this was a means by which I talked about augmenting our human intellect. And this concept kind of grew out of importance, and just realizing that throughout, even from prehistory days on through, we know that we were steadily doing things that augmented our capability. And getting a spoken language evolved was a very important thing to do that. And then another huge step was when we started to be able to get symbols that we could record or write and communicate by writing and printing. And then the computer comes along with just immensely more flexible ways in which we can move and convey and transmit, etc. So to me, the thought of just automating what we did on paper was just thinking, oh, that's tremendously short. It just does not at all convey what this is accessible to. And so I really wanted to, that's when the term augmenting came out, to say, look, these things are all means by which we increase or augment the capability we have for harnessing our brains and our ability to speak and to hear and to conceptualize and to abstract things, etc., so that okay, we now can write in a computer, but just to have that as a supplement or a way to automate the writing of we did on typewriters or pencils. It's just so the whole way that computers can facilitate or augment our ability to get our symbols in shape, to manipulate them, to communicate them, etc., and to the computer offering this interlinkage that you can have a citation that actually pointed to any arbitrary other document in any arbitrary place and position or piece of data in it, and that you could just go click and jump to it. Things like that just added very important new dimensional capabilities for managing the way in which you symbolize the concepts you're trying to deal with them, got them structured, not they're available, and can manipulate them and communicate them and cross-reference them. So this was all just very important to me, that much more than what was prevalent in the terminology of the 1960s, which I was starting to do this, that they call it office automation, that's we're automating the secretary, and the real user is the secretary. It's got to be easy to learn for that secretary. And I kept saying, no, look, we're augmenting, and the real user is going to be every knowledge worker in the world someday working this way. And it was just a real experience to realize that I was being laughed at as being ludicrous and out of shape. But anyway, so much goes. I've been really interested for decades in the evolution in our society of important things having to do with thinking and communicating, and then written words, written language, and how the books appeared, and then the computer kind of appeared as a way that you could, quote, automate that other, but it's really another step ahead in augmenting the ability of us to harness our heads. So the important things to me seem to be that we open up new ways to create and manipulate and portray symbolic structures of knowledge, and that the computer offered very different ways to do that. And so people just started out early with just the ways to edit it, and yes, there are that ways too, but even that was kept as being very simple and easy to learn. And there were tools and methods that we explored in my laboratory that gave a lot more power to writing and manipulating the content, and portraying it in very different ways. So what we were doing just did not fit with the paradigms that existed at the time, in which people were talking about this is office automation. The real user is the secretary. It's got to be easy to learn and natural to use for the secretary. And when I'd say, well, I'm convinced that the real user is going to be tomorrow's knowledge worker, from professionals and executives, and everyone's going to be using these, that this would just be given a horse laugh, because it's funny, but the prevailing embedded perception amongst most people at the time working in this was we are just simplifying and automating what has been done in the past with a typewriter and via a secretary, etc. So it became more and more clear to me, something that has prevailed in my orientation for many decades, is that the evolution in society of concepts, vocabulary, the artifacts such as pencils and typewriters and pens, and the computer, that all these things are co-evolving together in a complex way, and that society has gotten sort of used to that. That's the way it's going to happen, and to think farther ahead about the kinds of environment and productivity and capability that we would have if we looked at not only new tools but new skills and new ways to portray and shape information, etc. That all those together were going to make something just really radical. So it's slowly been happening, and I still think that we're still anchored in a way to the portrayal of our text as represented in the paragraphs and chapters and steps as we did with books, and that what the computer can do to help shape various ways in which we can actually see better the organization of our thoughts, the specifics of a certain place. Just go there and show them. Anyway,